I never expected things to spiral out of control the way they did. It all started so innocently. My name is Emily, and this is the story of how my cousin's girlfriend, Katie, crossed a line I never thought would be crossed. And trust me, you won't believe how it all went down. At first, I thought it was just me being paranoid, but as soon as Katie entered the picture, things felt off. She was always a little too charming, a little too friendly with me, always with that mischievous smile. My cousin, Ryan, was totally head over heels for her. I didn't think much of it at first. I mean, she was his girlfriend, and that should have been the end of it. But she kept getting closer to me, inch by inch, until it wasn't just a friendship anymore. There was always a strange tension whenever we were in the same room. At first, I thought I was just imagining things, but as time went on, I started to notice things that felt wrong. Like how she would laugh just a little too hard at my jokes, or how her eyes would linger a second too long when we made eye contact. It felt like she was testing the waters, daring me to do something I wasn't sure I should. But things really escalated one night at a party we had at Ryan's house. The whole family was there. Music was playing, everyone was laughing, and yet, something felt different. Katie's attention was all on me. Not on Ryan, not on anyone else, just me. She kept moving closer, brushing against me, as if she didn't care that Ryan was only a few feet away. I tried to brush it off, to ignore the tension building between us, but I couldn't. "Hey, are you okay?" Ryan asked, giving me a curious look when I stepped away from Katie. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just need some air." I excused myself and stepped outside for a breather. The night felt heavy. But little did I know, that was just the beginning. Katie came outside a few minutes later. She looked at me with those piercing eyes, and, for a moment, I saw something I couldn't explain. She wasn't the sweet, innocent girlfriend I thought she was. There was something darker underneath. I could feel it in my gut. "Emily," she said, her voice smooth, almost too smooth. "Why are you avoiding me?" I shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not avoiding you," I replied, but it was a lie. Every time I tried to get too close, something inside me told me to stay away. But Katie wasn't having it. "Oh, come on. We both know that's not true." She stepped closer, way too close, and before I could move, her hand brushed against mine. "Ryan's not here. Just you and me." It was innocent enough, or at least I tried to convince myself it was. But that moment, her touch, felt like a spark. It was dangerous. And I knew I was in way over my head. "Look, I'm not sure what you're doing, but..." Katie cut me off. "Relax, Emily," she whispered, a sly grin crossing her face. "Don't you want to know what it feels like?" My heart skipped a beat. What was she talking about? What did she mean? I pulled my hand back, trying to maintain control, but Katie wasn't done. She took another step forward, closing the distance between us. Her eyes were locked on mine, daring me to step closer, to cross that line. "You don't have to pretend," she said softly, her lips just inches from mine. "I know you want this." I froze. It felt like time stopped. My mind was racing. Should I push her away? Should I run back inside? Or should I give in to this insane temptation, this dangerous pull between us? The rest of the night passed in a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about that moment. Katie's touch, her smile, it was like a challenge. I had to figure out what it meant, but deep down, I knew one thing for sure, I was playing with fire, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could resist. But that was just the beginning. As much as I tried to ignore it, Katie wasn't going to let me forget what she wanted. I had no idea just how far she was willing to push to get it. And let me tell you, things were about to get a lot more complicated. Stick around because this story is just getting started, and you won't believe how it all unfolds. Trust me, the real drama starts now. It wasn't until a few days later that the real gravity of that night hit me. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that Katie's behavior didn't mean anything. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. It was like I had opened a door that should have stayed closed, and there was no way to lock it back up again. The next time I saw Katie, it wasn't just awkward, it was electric. Ryan was off doing his usual thing, and we were left alone. The tension between us had changed. It wasn't subtle anymore. The air felt thick, like something was about to explode. Katie was wearing that smile again, the one that made my heart race, and it didn't take long before I started second-guessing every decision I'd ever made. We were in the living room, just hanging out like we'd done before. But this time, it was different. She was sitting a little too close, her leg brushing against mine under the coffee table. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the TV, but every time I moved, so did she. "You seem distant," Katie said, her voice soft, almost too soft. I glanced over at her, and I saw that look again, the one that made my stomach twist. She wasn't acting like a girlfriend who was just passing time with her boyfriend's cousin. No, she was acting like someone who was playing a game. And I was the target. "I'm fine," I said, trying to keep things casual. But my heart was pounding in my chest. The closer she got, the harder it was to ignore it. "Just tired." Katie raised an eyebrow, a playful smirk on her lips. "Tired, huh? You sure? You've been acting so tense lately. I wonder why." She leaned closer, just a little too much for comfort, her voice a seductive whisper. "You don't have to pretend, you know. It's just me." It felt like a dare. I could feel my mind racing, my body tense. I wasn't sure what to do. Part of me wanted to jump up and run away. The other part of me was curious, no, more than curious. It was like a magnet pulling me in. And then she did it. She leaned in, her breath warm against my ear, and for one moment, everything around me stopped. "Come on, Emily," Katie whispered. "You felt it too, haven't you?" Before I could process what was happening, Katie's hand was on my knee. It was subtle, but it was deliberate. I stiffened, my mind screaming at me to pull away, but my body wouldn't listen. "Are you out of your mind?" I whispered, looking at her with wide eyes. But instead of pulling away, she just grinned, her fingers inching up my thigh. It was like she didn't care that we were crossing a line. Like she wanted to see just how far I would go, before I stopped her. "I'm just having a little fun," she said, her voice low and teasing. "You're always so serious, Emily. Maybe you need to loosen up." I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to do. Should I push her away? Tell her this was wrong? Should I leave? But something inside me, something dark and dangerous, didn't want to. I wanted to feel that rush again, the one I had felt the night at the party. But no, this was my cousin's girlfriend. This wasn't supposed to happen. But she wasn't going to stop. Katie wasn't the type to back off easily. I pulled back a little, my heart racing, trying to regain control of my thoughts. "We can't do this, Katie," I said, more forcefully than I intended. "You're with Ryan. This isn't right." Katie's expression darkened just for a second, but then the grin returned. "It's just a little fun, Emily. No harm done. It doesn't have to mean anything. We don't have to tell anyone. No one has to know. I stood up abruptly, my legs shaking. This has to stop, Katie. I don't want to get involved in whatever game you're playing. But as I turned to leave, I felt her eyes follow me. And I could feel it. She wasn't going to give up. Katie wasn't going anywhere. I left the house that day with a pit in my stomach. I wanted to forget about it, to pretend it never happened. But I knew deep down, it wasn't over. Katie wasn't going to just let me walk away. She'd made it clear she wasn't done with me yet. And that terrified me. Later that night, I received a text from her. "Are you avoiding me?" It read. "We were having so much fun." I stared at my phone, my finger hovering over the reply button. What was I supposed to say? Should I ignore it? Should I tell her the truth? Or was I already too deep into whatever game she was playing? I hesitated for a moment before typing my response. "I'm not avoiding you. I just don't want to make things weird. I'm with you on this. But it's over, Katie. We can't keep doing this." But I knew the moment I sent that message that it wasn't over. It was far from over. And when the next text came through, I could feel the weight of what was about to happen. "You sure?" it read. "Because it felt like you were enjoying it too." I wanted to say no, to tell her she was wrong, but I didn't. And that was when I realized I was already too far gone. I spent the next few days trying to avoid Katie, but every time I turned around, there she was, sending me texts, leaving me voicemails, or just showing up uninvited. It was like she couldn't leave me alone, and deep down, I knew she wasn't going to stop until she got what she wanted. I tried to talk myself out of it. I kept telling myself this was all just some weird phase, that maybe I was overreacting. But there was no denying it anymore. I was in way deeper than I ever thought I'd be. The worst part? I was starting to want it. Katie had a way of making me feel like I couldn't breathe whenever she was near me. Her touch was electric, her eyes daring me to do something I knew I shouldn't. I told myself over and over that this was wrong. I was just being manipulated. But then again, there was a part of me that couldn't resist. The turning point came on a quiet Friday night when Ryan was out of town again. Katie texted me earlier in the day asking if I wanted to hang out, and against my better judgment, I said yes. I told myself I was just being friendly. I was trying to be normal, trying to convince myself that I wasn't getting sucked into whatever game she was playing. I showed up at her apartment, a cold sweat on the back of my neck. The door was cracked open just enough for me to slip inside. Katie was standing there, wearing a simple, yet provocative outfit, her tight jeans, a tank top that hugged her curves just right. She looked like she knew exactly what effect she had on me. "You're here," she said, smiling softly but with that same glint in her eyes. "I was hoping you would come." I wanted to back out. I wanted to leave, to run as fast as I could. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped inside, trying to play it cool, trying to convince myself that this wasn't a big deal. We started talking about random things at first, but I could feel her eyes on me, her focus never wavering. Every word she said seemed like it had a double meaning, and every time I moved, she found an excuse to get closer. She'd lean in a little too much when she laughed, her leg brushing mine on the couch, her fingers gently grazing my arm. It was subtle, but not subtle enough for me to ignore. She was doing this on purpose. And it was working. "You seem tense," Katie said, her voice dropping a little lower. "Are you sure you're okay? You seem distant." I didn't know how to answer. I was trying to keep it together, to remind myself that this wasn't happening. But every time I tried to move away, Katie just closed the gap. "You should relax," she whispered, as if she could read my mind. "It's just me, Emily. You don't have to be so guarded all the time." I opened my mouth to say something, but the words caught in my throat. I was losing control of the situation. And I knew it. Katie reached out and touched my leg again. This time, there was nothing innocent about it. She didn't pull away. Instead, she kept her hand there, her fingers tracing the edge of my jeans. I froze. Every rational thought in my mind screamed at me to get up, to leave, to tell her this was wrong. But I didn't. I stayed. "Don't you want this?" she asked, her voice low and full of temptation. She leaned in closer, her breath warm on my cheek. "Don't you want me?" I couldn't respond. The words wouldn't come. The room felt like it was closing in on me, and every nerve in my body was telling me to move, to stop this before it went too far. But I couldn't. I couldn't stop myself. Before I even realized what was happening, Katie kissed me. It wasn't like the innocent peck from the other night. No, this time it was raw, urgent, and full of hunger. Her hands were already moving, pulling me closer as she deepened the kiss. I pulled back for a second, my heart pounding in my chest. "Katie, this isn't right," I whispered, but my voice faltered. She just smiled, that same wicked grin I had seen a million times before. "What are you so afraid of, Emily? You can have a little fun. No one has to know." I didn't know how to respond. I was terrified, confused, and conflicted all at once. My cousin was out there, completely unaware of what was happening in this very apartment. But I couldn't deny the growing attraction I felt, the desire that Katie had awakened in me. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. Katie's hands were everywhere, and before I knew it, I was leaning into the kiss, responding to her touches. It felt like everything was spinning out of control. It felt wrong, but also so right in the moment. I had never felt anything like this before. I wanted to stop. I wanted to run away. But Katie was persistent, pulling me back to her with every touch, every whisper. It wasn't until later that I realized the truth. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The line between what was right and what was dangerous. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a stupid mistake. It was a choice. And now, there was no turning back. The morning after, everything felt wrong. I woke up in a haze, my body still pulsing with adrenaline, but my mind was a whirlwind of guilt. Katie was already gone, probably out shopping or whatever, leaving me alone in her apartment. The sunlight was creeping through the blinds, casting long, strange shadows across the room. I sat up slowly, my head pounding, trying to process everything that had happened the night before. I couldn't believe what I had just done. How could I have let it happen? I was supposed to be better than this. I kept thinking about Josh, my cousin. The one person I had always considered family. What the hell was I doing? I replayed the night in my mind, and the image of Katie's face, her touch, her smile, it all felt like it was burning into my memory. And it wasn't just the guilt. There was something else. Something that I wasn't sure I wanted to admit. I hated myself for it, but part of me was still craving her. I shouldn't feel this way. It was wrong. I had ruined everything, and I was too ashamed to even face Josh, much less tell him what happened. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw her again, and all those thoughts came rushing back. Katie had managed to get under my skin. And the worst part? I was starting to think maybe that was her plan all along. Maybe this wasn't just a mistake. Maybe she'd been manipulating me from the start. I grabbed my phone, but there were no new messages. I hadn't heard from her in a few hours, but it was only a matter of time before she reached out. I knew she would. Katie wasn't one to let things go easily. And, deep down, I knew that meant I wasn't off the hook just because I felt guilty. The thing is, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to be off the hook. I sat on the couch for what felt like hours, trying to work up the courage to get out of her apartment. But I couldn't shake the thought of what I had just done. I had broken my own moral code, betrayed my cousin's trust, and worse, I'd allowed myself to get caught up in a situation I could have easily avoided. I could have left before it escalated, but I didn't. I picked up my phone again, my hands shaking as I scrolled through my messages. Nothing from Josh, but there it was, Katie's name. Just one text, "Are you still thinking about last night?" I hesitated before opening it. What could she possibly want to say now? I had already made up my mind that I didn't want to get tangled in her game any longer. But the truth was, I couldn't stop myself from responding. "I don't know what I was thinking, Katie. That was a huge mistake." There. I'd said it. I had admitted to myself that I messed up. It didn't feel better, though. It just made everything seem more real. But then, almost immediately, my phone buzzed again. "It doesn't have to be a mistake, Emily. You know what we shared last night wasn't just a mistake. You felt it too. Don't try to lie to yourself." I threw the phone on the couch, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. How was I supposed to fix this? There was no going back. I had already crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And if I was being honest, it didn't even feel like something I could forget. Part of me, deep down, felt alive in a way I had never felt before. The rush of doing something forbidden, something dangerous, was exhilarating. But I also felt sick. Ashamed. And I knew it was only going to get worse from here. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message, it was a call. I saw her name light up the screen, and for a moment, I thought about letting it go to voicemail. I could pretend like I wasn't in the middle of a mess. I could tell myself I would forget about it and move on. But I knew that wasn't possible. Katie wasn't going to let me. I answered the call. "Hello?" "Emily," she said, her voice smooth, almost sweet. "We need to talk." "I don't think we do," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, but it came out shaky. "Oh, I think we do. You think I'm the only one who wanted this, don't you? You're just as much to blame as I am." I could feel my heart racing again. "You need to stop, Katie. This isn't." "No, you listen to me." Her tone shifted, becoming sharp. "I've been patient with you. I've given you space to think about it. But let's face facts, Emily. You want me. And you know it." I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to say. She was right. I had wanted it. I hated that I had wanted it, but I couldn't lie to myself anymore. "You can pretend like it was a mistake all you want," Katie continued, her voice lower now, almost a whisper. "But we both know it wasn't." And then, just like that, she hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand. Every instinct told me to cut ties, to walk away from her, before it got even more complicated. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, I didn't know if I could. Katie had a way of making me question everything. making me feel like I wasn't in control. And that scared me more than anything. The night Katie invited me over, I knew I shouldn't have gone. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to stay away, but I ignored it. When I arrived at her apartment, she greeted me at the door with that knowing smile, the one that set my nerves on fire. She wore something casual, but dangerously inviting, a fitted tank top and loose shorts that revealed just enough to keep my imagination running wild. "Hey, you," she said softly, her voice smooth like honey. "I was starting to think you weren't coming." I stepped inside, already feeling the tension crackle between us. The apartment smelled faintly of vanilla, her signature scent, and it wrapped around me like a trap. I should have left then and there. I should have said no. But instead, I found myself sitting on her couch, trying desperately to act normal as she sat just a little too close. We started watching a movie, something light and unassuming, but it didn't matter. I couldn't focus on anything except the way her leg brushed against mine under the coffee table, the way her body leaned ever so slightly toward me. My breathing grew shallow, my palms damp against my jeans. Katie shifted closer, her arm resting along the back of the couch, her fingers grazing my shoulder. "Relax," she whispered, her lips so close to my ear that I could feel the warmth of her breath. "You're so tense." "I'm fine," I lied, my voice tight and unconvincing. She smirked, her eyes glinting with mischief. "No, you're not." Her hand moved to my thigh, just a light touch, but it sent a shiver through me. "You don't have to pretend, Emily. I know you feel it too." I turned to look at her, intending to tell her to stop, to put some space between us. But the words died on my lips when I met her gaze. Her eyes were dark, filled with something primal and intoxicating. She leaned in, her hand sliding further up my leg, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Katie, we can't." I managed to whisper, but my voice lacked conviction. "Why not?" she asked, her lips just a breath away from mine. "No one's here. No one will know. It's just you and me." And then she kissed me. It wasn't hesitant or tentative. It was bold, demanding, and it took everything in me not to melt into it. Her lips were soft, her hands insistent as they cupped my face and pulled me closer. I wanted to push her away. I wanted to stop. But instead, I found myself kissing her back, my body betraying me as my hands tangled in her hair. Her scent, her touch, her presence, it was overwhelming. I forgot about everything else, Josh, the consequences, the guilt. All that existed was this moment, this forbidden connection that burned hotter than anything I'd ever felt. Katie pulled back just enough to look at me, her lips swollen, her breathing heavy. "See," she murmured. "I told you it didn't have to be so complicated." I shook my head, trying to clear the haze clouding my judgment. "This is wrong," I said, but the words sounded hollow even to me. She smiled, running her fingers along my jawline. "Then why does it feel so right?" Her words hit me like a punch to the gut because, in that moment, I couldn't deny it anymore. It did feel right. Too right. And that terrified me. Katie leaned in again, her lips brushing against my neck, her hands trailing down my sides. My body responded instinctively, arching into her touch as my mind screamed at me to stop. But I didn't. I couldn't. The night blurred into a haze of heat and intensity, every boundary I thought I had crumbling under her touch. Katie was magnetic, consuming, and utterly relentless. She knew exactly what she was doing, and I let her. I let her pull me into something I couldn't escape, something I wasn't sure I wanted to escape. By the time I left her apartment in the early hours of the morning, I was a mess of emotions. Shame, desire, regret, and something dangerously close to longing swirled inside me. I couldn't believe what I'd just done, what I'd allowed to happen. But the worst part? A small, insidious part of me wanted more. The door slammed behind me as I walked into my apartment. I couldn't escape the whirlwind of emotions clawing at me. Every moment with Katie replayed in my mind on a relentless loop. Guilt, anger, and something darker churned inside me, a storm I couldn't control. My phone buzzed again, Katie, no doubt. I didn't even look at the screen. I couldn't. But fate doesn't wait for readiness. An hour later, Josh showed up. His eyes were rimmed red, his jaw tight. "We need to talk." His voice was low, shaky, like he already knew what I didn't have the courage to confess. Panic gripped me. About what? He held up his phone, the damning messages glowing on the screen. "Don't lie to me, Emily." I saw the texts. I froze. My stomach sank as the world tilted. Katie's texts, our texts, were out. She had sent him everything. This wasn't just a mistake anymore, it was an open betrayal. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," I stammered. "Josh, I swear." "You didn't mean for it to happen?" He cut me off, his voice cracking with emotion. "You were supposed to be family. You were supposed to have my back." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. There was nothing I could say to make it right. He looked at me with an expression I'll never forget, hurt, betrayal, disbelief. "Do you even realize what you've done?" Josh's voice wavered. "Katie was the one thing I trusted, and you destroyed it." I reached for him, but he pulled back. "Don't," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't get to fix this." As he turned to leave, my heart shattered. I had lost him, lost everything. And all because of Katie. Days later, Katie called. I ignored her at first, but she was relentless. When I finally answered, her voice was as sweet and venomous as ever. "Emily, we need to talk." "I think we're way past that," I said coldly. "You ruined everything." Katie laughed, a soft, chilling sound. "I ruined everything?" "You didn't seem to mind when you kissed me back." I clenched the phone tighter. "Josh knows." "You made sure of that." "What's your game, Katie? What do you want from me?" "You." Her answer was simple, direct, and terrifying. "This was never about Josh. It was always about you." A sharp intake of breath escaped me. "You're insane." "No, I'm just honest," she replied, her voice calm, calculated. "You think you're so innocent, Emily. But deep down, you wanted this as much as I did. Don't act like you didn't feel alive for the first time in forever." Her words were like a slap, but part of me knew she was right. And that scared me more than anything,